The supermarket was full of voices, footsteps, and the sound of carts rolling over the tiles. Bright lights hung from the ceiling, shining down on rows of food stacked neatly on shelves. Families moved from one corner to another, filling their baskets with everything they needed. In the middle of this crowd stood a single mother with her small daughter holding her hand. Her basket was not full. It carried only a few things: bread, milk, rice, and a packet of biscuits that the little girl had begged for. She looked at the basket again and again, worried if it was too much. She had counted her money many times at home before coming. She thought it would be enough. But deep inside she feared it would fall short. The little girl looked up with a hopeful smile. "Mama, can we have the biscuits today?" The mother forced a smile and nodded. Yes, only today. She wanted her daughter to feel happy, even if it cost her the last coin she had. As they reached the counter, the mother placed each item slowly on the belt. The cashier, a young man with tired eyes, scanned them one by one. The machine beeped with every item, and the numbers on the screen climbed higher. The mother's hands began to sweat. She slipped her fingers into her old purse and touched the few folded notes and coins inside. When the cashier finally said the total, her heart sank. The amount was more than the money she had. She quickly counted her notes, then her coins, then again, hoping she had made a mistake. But no matter how she counted, the money was less. Her lips trembled and she lowered her eyes, not wanting to meet the cashier's gaze. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I don't have enough." The people behind her in line shifted impatiently. Some frowned, some sighed, but no one said a word. The little girl didn't understand at first. She tugged her mother's arm, looking at the biscuits on the counter. "Mama, what happened? Can't we take them?" The mother swallowed hard and forced a weak smile. "We'll put some things back, darling." Her hand reached out, trembling, and she picked up the biscuits first. She thought, "We don't need this. She can live without it." She placed it back on the counter, away from the bag. Then she picked up the packet of rice. Then the milk. Each time her heart grew heavier, as if she was removing not just food but small pieces of her daughter's happiness. The cashier watched silently. His eyes softened, but he didn't speak. The mother continued, pulling item after item aside until only bread remained. The total price still didn't match her money. She would need to remove even more. Her face flushed red and tears threatened to fall. She felt the weight of shame pressing down on her, knowing everyone behind was watching. The little girl finally realized what was happening. Her eyes filled with confusion. "Mama, please." "We need the milk." The mother bit her lip so hard it almost bled. She wanted to scream at life for being so cruel. She wanted to tell her daughter she deserved everything, not just leftovers, but all she could do was whisper, "I'm sorry." She turned to hand back the last item, her hand shaking as if each movement drained her soul. The silence in the air was sharp. Even the impatient customers behind had stopped shifting. Something about the mother's trembling hands and the child's pleading eyes had pulled them into the moment. The cashier's fingers froze above the register. His eyes locked on the small girl, then on the mother's desperate face. He felt something heavy in his chest, like a voice whispering to him. He knew this wasn't just another customer. This was someone fighting a silent battle and losing it right in front of everyone. The mother pushed the bread aside. "I'll just take what I can afford," she whispered. Her voice was dry, almost invisible. The cashier suddenly spoke, his tone calm but firm. "Wait," the mother froze, confused. Slowly, she raised her eyes to meet his. For a moment, she wondered if he was going to scold her or ask her to leave. The line behind had grown longer, and she felt smaller than ever. The cashier looked down at the items, then back at her purse lying open with just a few coins inside. He didn't move his hands to cancel the items. Instead, he let them rest on the counter as if holding back a decision. The little girl whispered again, almost begging. "Mama, please." The mother's throat tightened. Her hand reached once more to remove the bread. But before she could touch it, the cashier gently pushed the bread back toward her. Her eyes widened. She didn't understand. The air around her grew tense, the customers leaning slightly forward, curious. The mother felt her heart race. Was he refusing to let her return it? Why? The cashier's expression stayed calm, but his eyes burned with something unspoken. He simply said, "Keep them." The words echoed louder than the noise of the supermarket. The mother froze, her hand still in midair. The little girl's mouth fell open. For a second, the whole world seemed to pause. The cashier didn't explain, not yet, but in that moment a spark of mystery lit the air. Something unexpected was about to happen, and so, the empty wallet was not the end of the story, it was only the beginning. The mother stood frozen, her fingers still stretched toward the bread, unsure if she had heard correctly. The words "keep them" were soft, but they carried a strange power. Around her, the supermarket noise faded into a hush. Even the customers behind her stopped shifting impatiently. They were watching closely now. Her daughter blinked in confusion. "Mama, what did he say?" The mother looked at the cashier with uncertain eyes. I don't understand. I can't pay for these." Her voice trembled as if expecting him to repeat the harsh truth she already knew. But the cashier didn't move back. Instead, he gently pushed the bread closer, refusing to let her return it. His expression was calm, but there was firmness in his eyes. "You don't need to put anything back," he said quietly, though his words carried across the counter like thunder. The mother's heart raced. "Please don't do this." "Rules are rules." "I don't want to cause trouble." The cashier leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "The only rule that matters right now is that you and your daughter don't go hungry tonight." Her lips parted, but no words came out. For years, she had learned to swallow pride, to live with sacrifice. She was used to being invisible, another poor woman in a long line of tired faces. But this refusal was different. He wasn't letting her disappear into shame. He was pulling her back, holding her ground for her when she couldn't. The people behind whispered. A man in a suit muttered, "What's going on?" A woman carrying a shopping bag leaned closer, curious. Some frowned, thinking it was just a delay. Others felt something stirring in their chest, though they didn't yet know why. The little girl's eyes sparkled with hope. She tugged at her mother's hand, whispering, "Maybe we can still take the milk, Mama." The mother shook her head quickly, still caught between fear and gratitude. "No," she said softly, to both her daughter and the cashier. "I can't accept this. You don't know me. Why would you do this?" The cashier's tired eyes softened. For a brief moment, his face revealed more than kindness. It showed pain, the kind of pain only someone who had lived through hunger himself could understand. He didn't give her a long explanation. He only said, "Because I know what it feels like." Her chest tightened. She wanted to ask more, but his hands moved swiftly now. He scanned the rest of her items back into the bag, refusing to let her stop him. Each beep from the machine felt like a small battle won against despair. Milk, rice, bread, even the biscuits the little girl had chosen. He didn't let a single item return to the shelf. The mother stepped back, shaken. She whispered again, "Please. You'll get in trouble. They'll fire you." But the cashier shook his head slowly. "Some things are worth the risk." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his own wallet. It was old, the leather worn and cracked from years of use. He opened it and the mother caught a glimpse. There wasn't much inside. A few notes folded tightly like a treasure carefully hidden. He took them out anyway, counting them with steady fingers. The mother's breath caught in her throat. She wanted to stop him, to shout that this wasn't right, that she couldn't allow him to sacrifice for her, but her voice refused to come. She was trapped between pride and desperation, her body frozen in place. The cashier handed the money over, his expression calm, almost ordinary, as if paying for strangers was part of his daily routine. But everyone around knew it wasn't ordinary. The silence in the line grew deeper, some eyes filled with guilt, others with respect. The little girl, too young to understand the weight of pride and shame, only saw the miracle. Her face lit up and she whispered to her mother, "See? We can take the biscuits." Tears welled up in the mother's eyes. She bent down, hugging her daughter quickly, trying to hide her face. She didn't want anyone to see the flood of emotions she couldn't control. Gratitude, shame, relief, hope, all crashing together. Finally, she turned back to the cashier. Why are you doing this? You don't even know us." The cashier placed the receipt in her trembling hand. His answer was simple, almost too simple for the moment. Because no one should have to return food they need. For a moment, she could only stare at him. She wanted to thank him, to say something powerful enough to match what he had done, but no words felt enough. So she whispered the only thing she could manage. "Thank you." The cashier gave a small nod, not seeking recognition, not seeking gratitude. His eyes returned to the register, ready for the next customer. But everyone in line knew this was no ordinary transaction. The mother picked up her bag, her daughter clutching her arm, and began to walk away. Yet each step felt heavy, as if she carried more than food now. She carried a story, a memory that would not fade. Behind her, whispers rose among the customers. "Did you see that? He paid for her. Why would he do it?" Some shook their heads, puzzled. Others nodded slowly, as if they had just witnessed something sacred. The cashier, meanwhile, stood silently at his counter, his wallet lighter, but his spirit strangely unburdened. He didn't regret it, not even for a second. And though the mother and her daughter left the store, she knew this refusal, the refusal to let her give up, was not just about food. It was about dignity, about humanity, and deep inside she felt something shift. This moment was not the end of her struggle, but it was the spark of something greater. The supermarket returned to its usual noise after the mother left, but the silence inside her heart remained heavy. She walked out slowly, her daughter skipping beside her with the biscuits clutched tightly in her small hands. The mother's eyes burned, not only because of the tears she had held back, but because she could not understand why a stranger had chosen to help when so many others looked away. She kept glancing back through the glass doors. The cashier had already moved on to the next customer, his face calm, his hands steady. It was as if nothing extraordinary had happened. He did not smile, did not look for thanks, did not try to stand as a hero. He only stood as himself, a man doing his work as if his small act was too ordinary to deserve notice. The mother whispered under her breath, "Why would he do that?" Her daughter tugged her sleeve. "Mama, he was like a superhero, wasn't he?" The mother forced a smile. "Yes, darling, but sometimes superheroes don't wear capes. Sometimes they stand behind counters." They walked home with their bag, but the mother's thoughts stayed behind at the store. She had lived years struggling with bills, skipping meals so her child could eat, waiting in long lines at charity kitchens, yet no one had ever stopped her from returning food she couldn't afford. Most cashiers only sighed, scanned again, or looked at her with impatience. This one had refused. He had made a choice against rules, against comfort, maybe even against his own safety at work. At the same time, inside the store, the cashier's shift continued. He spoke little to customers, his voice soft but steady. Some gave him strange looks. Some even smiled, but he did not respond beyond what was needed. Deep inside, he carried no pride for what he had done. He only carried a memory. It was not the first time he had seen hunger. As a boy, he remembered standing with his mother at another counter, her hands trembling as she counted coins, realizing they were short. He remembered how she returned milk, then bread, while he stood too young to understand why the world looked away. That memory lived in him like a scar, and today, when he saw the single mother's hands shaking in the same way, the scar burned. He could not let history repeat itself in silence. Later that evening, when his shift ended, he stepped out into the cool night air. The streetlights flickered, and the world outside felt quiet compared to the bright store. He slipped his hands into his pockets, feeling the emptiness of his wallet. He had spent money that was supposed to last him until the end of the week. It meant skipping a meal, maybe two. But strangely, he didn't feel regret. Hunger was familiar. But helping her had filled him with something hunger never could take away. Back at her small apartment, the mother set the bag of groceries on the table. Her daughter rushed to open the biscuits and broke one in half, offering it to her. The mother laughed softly, though her chest ached. She accepted the piece, chewing slowly, tasting not just sweetness but something larger, hope. Her daughter climbed into her lap. "Mama, why did he help us?" "People never help us," the mother kissed her forehead. Maybe because he remembered what it feels like to be us. She couldn't shake the feeling that the cashier's quiet gesture was more than simple kindness. It carried weight as if it came from his own wounds. She wanted to return to the store, to thank him again properly, to tell him how much it mattered. But pride kept her back. She didn't want him to think she was weak, though inside she felt weaker than ever. Meanwhile, whispers spread among the customers who had witnessed the event. By the next day, a woman told her neighbor. A man mentioned it at his office. The story grew piece by piece without the cashier even knowing. People called it strange, rare, even impossible in a world so selfish. Some dismissed it as foolish, but for others it became a spark. The mother sat awake that night, staring at the ceiling while her daughter slept beside her. She thought about all the doors that had closed on her in the past, all the times she had been turned away. And now one door had opened, not through words, not through promises, but through action. Quiet, simple, unspoken action. Her heart whispered to her, maybe kindness still exists. Maybe humanity is not lost, and yet she knew there was more to the cashier's story. Something about the way his eyes had softened, the way he had spoken only a few words, left her certain that he too carried burdens unseen. She promised herself silently one day she would return, not just to buy food, but to understand the man who had changed her night with a single gesture. Outside, the world slept. The supermarket closed, the lights dimmed, and the tired cashier walked home through quiet streets. His body was weary, his stomach empty, but his spirit felt strangely alive. He knew tomorrow he would wake up to the same routine, the same struggle, but tonight he carried a secret only he and the mother shared, the power of refusing to let despair win. And though no one spoke of it openly, both of them knew this story was far from over. The next day began like any other. The supermarket opened its sliding doors and the flow of customers returned. The cashier stood at his station again, his uniform neat but worn at the edges. He worked with the same calm expression, scanning items, giving change, and saying the same quiet greetings. To most people, he was invisible, a man behind a counter. But to the single mother, he had become something more. She returned that afternoon, carrying her daughter in one hand and a small piece of paper in the other. It was a short list written carefully in pencil, of only the most important things: bread, eggs, milk. She wasn't sure if she was ready to see him again. Her heart beat faster with each step toward the counter. When she reached the store, the cashier was busy helping another customer. She stopped near the fruit section, pretending to choose apples, but her eyes kept drifting back to him. She wanted to say thank you again, but pride tied her tongue. She wanted to ask why, but fear of hearing the truth held her back. Just then, a worker from the store, an older woman with kind eyes, came over to arrange vegetables near her. The mother whispered softly, "That cashier." The young man. "Do you know him well?" The worker looked up, then smiled faintly. "Yes, we all know him. He doesn't talk much, but he works harder than anyone here." She lowered her voice. "He has his own struggles, but he never complains." The mother tilted her head, curiosity pulling her in. "Struggles? What do you mean?" The worker sighed. "He lost his parents when he was young. Grew up with nothing. I heard he even slept in shelters before he found this job. He saves every coin carefully. Some days he skips lunch so he can send money to his younger brother who is still in school. He has nothing, but still, he gives." The mother's eyes widened. The picture became clear. He wasn't a man with extra money. He wasn't helping out of comfort. He had chosen to give despite having almost nothing himself. The worker continued. "Last winter I saw him wear the same thin jacket every day, even in the snow. When we asked, he only smiled and said he was fine. Later I learned he had given his warm coat to a neighbor's child. He said the boy needed it more." The mother's throat tightened. She looked again at the cashier, who was now gently speaking to a young couple at the counter. He wore the same quiet face, as if nothing in the world touched him. Yet behind that calm was a storm of sacrifices no one ever saw. Her daughter tugged her sleeve, holding up an apple. "Mama, can we buy this too?" The mother blinked away her tears and nodded. "Yes, we can." As she moved toward the counter, her steps felt heavy. She didn't just see him as a cashier anymore. She saw him as a mirror, someone who carried burdens quietly, someone who fought invisible battles every day, and yet still found the strength to help others. When it was her turn, the cashier looked up and recognized her instantly. His eyes softened, but he said nothing unusual. "Good afternoon. Did you find everything you need?" The mother nodded, placing her small list of items on the counter. Her hands trembled slightly. She wanted to say something, to tell him she knew his story, but the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she whispered, "Thank you for yesterday." The cashier gave a small nod. It was nothing, but she knew it wasn't nothing. It was everything. Her daughter smiled at him and placed the apple on the counter last. "This is my favorite," she said shyly. The cashier smiled faintly, the first true smile she had seen from him. "It's a good choice," he replied. The mother watched closely. For the first time, she noticed the faint, tired lines under his eyes, the way his shoulders carried invisible weight. and the way his hands were rough from endless work. She realized he wasn't just a man who helped her once. He was a man who had been helping silently all along, even when no one noticed. When the groceries were packed, the cashier handed her the bag. Their eyes met for a second longer than usual. It was a silent exchange, a language of shared understanding. Neither spoke of struggle, but both knew it lived inside them. As she left, the worker who had told her his story whispered again, "He doesn't want attention. To him, kindness is just breathing. But people like him, they are rare." Walking home, the mother carried more than food. She carried the hidden story of a man who had turned his own pain into compassion. She thought of all the people who walked past him every day without seeing him. She thought of how many lives he must have touched quietly, without ever asking for thanks. That night, as she tucked her daughter into bed, the child asked, "Mama, why do you look so serious?" The mother stroked her hair gently. "Because today I learned something important. Sometimes the people who give the most are the ones who have the least." The little girl thought for a moment, then whispered, "Then he's really a hero." The mother smiled softly. "Yes, he is," and in her heart she made a promise. She would not let his hidden story stay hidden forever. Somehow she would find a way to honor him, to return even a piece of the kindness he had given. News traveled faster than anyone expected. What had started as a quiet moment between a cashier, a mother, and her little girl did not remain quiet for long. One of the customers who had been standing in line that evening told her husband about it. The husband told his co-workers at the office. Another customer posted a short message online. "Today I saw a cashier refuse to let a poor mother return food. He paid from his own wallet instead. Faith in humanity restored." By the next day, dozens of people had read it. Some liked it. Some shared it. Others wrote comments like, "Stories like this give me hope, and we need more people like him in the world." The cashier, of course, knew nothing about this. He worked his shift like every other day, moving quietly from one customer to another, never thinking his simple action would mean anything to anyone. To him it was natural, even ordinary. But outside the store, ripples began to spread. The single mother noticed it first. When she returned to the store a few days later, she saw two women whispering and pointing toward the cashier. Their eyes carried respect, not annoyance. She saw an old man pat the cashier on the shoulder as he left, smiling. Something was changing. The mother placed her few items on the counter again. The cashier greeted her politely, the same way as always, with no hint of pride in his voice. But she noticed people in line watching differently now. They weren't looking at her with impatience anymore. They were watching him, almost expecting another act of kindness. She walked home that day thinking about how rare it was to see one action create such a shift in people's hearts. For so long she had lived in a world where everyone looked away. Now, because of one refusal, eyes were opening. By the weekend, the small online post had reached hundreds. A local blogger picked it up, writing, "In a world where selfishness is common, one cashier showed what true humanity looks like." Soon, people from other neighborhoods started coming to the supermarket, curious to see the man they had read about. Some brought their business there on purpose. Others stood in line just to watch him work. To their surprise, he was exactly as described. Quiet, humble, moving through each transaction as if nothing unusual had ever happened. He didn't brag, didn't smile for attention, didn't even know half of them were there because of him. One afternoon, a young man came with only a small carton of milk. When the cashier scanned it, the customer pushed another $5 bill across the counter. "Keep the change," he said. The cashier frowned slightly. "Sir, that's too much." But the man smiled. "It's for someone else who might need it." The cashier paused, then nodded slowly. For the first time, he realized his own action had inspired another. From then on, the ripple grew larger. A woman donated an extra loaf of bread to the store each morning, asking the cashier to quietly give it to someone who struggled to pay. A group of college students pooled money and left it in an envelope for him, saying it was a kindness fund. The manager of the store, noticing the attention, didn't scold him for breaking the rules that night. Instead, he told the staff, "Maybe we should all try to be a little more like him." The single mother watched all this with wonder. Her heart filled with pride, not only for what the cashier had done, but for what his action had awakened in others. She saw strangers helping each other carry bags, people paying forward small acts in his spirit. For the first time in years, her community didn't feel cold. It felt alive. One evening, she and her daughter passed by a bus stop where two young men were talking. She overheard one say, "I heard about that cashier. If he can help someone with nothing, what excuse do I have?" The other nodded. "True, I'm going to do something good this week, even if it's small." The mother smiled quietly to herself. The ripple was moving farther than even she had imagined. Meanwhile, the cashier remained unchanged. He still lived in his small apartment, still skipped meals to save for his brother's school, still wore his old jacket. But now, whenever he worked, he noticed something different: kindness around him. Customers offering change to those short of money. Strangers holding doors for mothers with children. Little things, but they built up. For once, he wasn't the only one refusing to let the world stay harsh. Others were beginning to refuse too. At night, walking home, he thought about it. He didn't believe in fame, didn't care about attention, but he couldn't ignore the shift around him. His simple act had turned into something he hadn't planned, a chain reaction. And though he still felt the weight of his own struggles, he also felt lighter knowing that maybe, just maybe, he had planted something good in people's hearts. Back in her apartment, the single mother looked at her daughter eating a small meal and whispered a prayer of thanks, not just for the food but for the change she had witnessed. Her empty wallet had started a story. His refusal had written the first chapter. But now the ripple was writing the rest, and none of them yet knew how far it would reach. The days passed and the ripples of kindness spread wider. But inside the single mother's heart there was still an ache. She could not forget the cashier's quiet act. The way he had refused to let her walk away empty-handed. She had received much, yet given nothing back. Each time she looked at the food on her table, she remembered his tired eyes, his old wallet, and the sacrifice behind his gesture. One evening, as she washed the last dishes, her daughter came running with an idea. "Mama, why don't we make something for him?" "Like a thank you gift." The mother paused, wiping her wet hands on a towel. She looked at her small kitchen, bare shelves, a weak stove, and little left to give. But her daughter's innocent words stirred something inside her. Maybe she could give him not money, not riches, but something made from her own hands. That night she worked quietly while her daughter slept. She gathered flour, sugar, and the last bit of butter she had saved. Her hands moved carefully, mixing, shaping, and baking. The oven glowed faintly in the dark apartment, filling the room with the warm smell of homemade bread and cookies. She had not baked in years, but the memory of her late mother's recipes guided her hands. When she finished, she placed everything in a small box, wrapping it in old paper decorated with her daughter's crayon drawings. The box wasn't expensive. It wasn't beautiful, but it carried love, effort, and gratitude. The next morning, she dressed her daughter and held the box tightly in her hands. As they walked to the supermarket, her heart pounded. She wondered if he would accept it, or if he would refuse like she had tried to refuse him. Still, she felt it was something she must do. Inside the store, the cashier was at his station as always. His uniform looked the same, his face calm, though his eyes seemed even more tired than before. Customers came and went, but when he saw her step forward, carrying the small box, his expression changed just slightly. Surprise flickered across his features. The mother placed her few groceries on the counter. Her hands shook as she pushed the box toward him. This is for you," she whispered. The cashier frowned gently. "For me?" She nodded quickly. "I don't have much, but I wanted to say thank you. You gave when you had nothing to spare. I can't forget that. Please accept this. It's all I can offer." The line behind them grew quiet again. Customers leaned in, curious. The cashier looked at the box, at the uneven wrapping covered with crayon flowers, at the mother's trembling hands, and at the child's hopeful smile. Slowly, he reached out and touched the box, but he didn't pull it toward himself. "I didn't help you to receive anything in return," he said softly. The mother's eyes filled with tears. "And I didn't make this because I thought you wanted something back. I made it because kindness deserves to be answered. If you refuse it, then you're doing to me what I tried to do to you that day, turning away a gift that comes from the heart." Her words struck him. His eyes lowered, remembering that moment at the counter when she had tried to return food. He had refused her then, believing it was right. and now she was refusing to let her gratitude be dismissed. The little girl pushed the box closer. "Please, sir, we made it for you." The cashier's fingers trembled slightly as he lifted the box at last. His rough hands felt the light weight of it, but also the heavy meaning behind it. He opened it carefully and saw the homemade bread and cookies inside. A faint smile touched his lips, the rare, genuine kind that reached his eyes. "Thank you," he whispered. It was all he could say because words felt too small. The customers behind clapped softly, some smiling, some wiping their eyes. It was a quiet moment, but it carried more power than any loud applause. The mother felt her chest lighten, as if a burden she didn't even know she carried had finally lifted. That night, when the cashier returned to his small apartment, he placed the box on his table. He sat alone, breaking a piece of the bread and tasting it. It was warm, soft, and filled with care. For once, his meal wasn't just food. It was proof that even he, a man who gave silently, could also receive. He leaned back, staring at the dim ceiling light. For years he had believed his role was only to give, to endure hunger so others could eat. But tonight, with that small box in his home, he realized something new. Kindness was not one way. It was a circle. The mother, too, sat with her daughter that evening, smiling softly. For the first time, she didn't feel like a helpless woman being saved. She felt like someone who could give too, no matter how little she had. And so, the story that began with an empty wallet now carried a new chapter. The return gift, simple but powerful. A reminder that even the smallest offerings could carry the weight of the world. Weeks turned into months, but the memory of that day never faded. What began with an empty wallet and a quiet refusal had now grown into something far bigger than anyone expected. The small supermarket became more than just a place to buy food. It became a place where kindness lived. Customers started coming not just to shop, but to share. One man left extra coins at the counter for anyone short on change. A woman brought extra fruit every Saturday, asking the cashier to give it away discreetly. Even children, inspired by the story their parents told them, would place little notes in the cashier's tip jar, saying things like, "Thank you for being kind," or "You are our hero." The cashier remained the same, quiet, humble, moving through his shifts without seeking attention. But something inside him had changed. For the first time in years, he didn't feel invisible. He realized his small act had not disappeared into silence. It had multiplied, living inside others. The single mother noticed it most of all. Every time she entered the store, she saw strangers helping each other. Once, she watched as a teenager paid for an old woman's medicine. Another time, a customer carried heavy bags for a struggling father. These weren't random accidents. They were reflections, echoes of the night the cashier had refused to let her return her food. Her daughter, too, was changing. She would smile at strangers more, hold doors open, even share her biscuits with kids at school. "Kindness spreads, Mama," she would say proudly. The mother knew she was right. The seed planted that night had taken root. One afternoon, a local journalist visited the supermarket after hearing countless whispers about the mysterious cashier. The story appeared in the local paper with the headline, "The Cashier Who Changed a Community with One Simple Act." The article didn't reveal much about his personal life. He had refused to share details, but it described how his action had inspired others. The article spread quickly, reaching beyond their town. Letters began arriving at the store addressed to the kind cashier. Some came with small donations, others with stories of kindness inspired by him. People wrote things like, "Your story reminded me to help my neighbor," or, "Because of you, I paid for a stranger's meal today." The cashier, reading these letters late at night, felt overwhelmed. He never wanted fame. He never asked for recognition. Yet here it was, arriving at his hands. He realized that kindness was like light. It could not be hidden once it began to shine. The single mother decided to do something in return, something lasting. With the help of a few neighbors, she organized a small community kitchen. Every Sunday, families who had little could come and share meals together. The idea was simple. Those who had more would bring what they could, and those who had less would still eat. On the first Sunday, the cashier arrived quietly, carrying nothing but his presence. To his surprise, the mother and daughter welcomed him with warm smiles. She placed a plate of food in front of him and whispered, "This time you eat first." He hesitated, almost embarrassed, but the crowd around insisted. And for the first time he allowed himself to sit, to be served, to be cared for. The food was ordinary, rice, bread, soup, but to him it tasted like something greater. It tasted like belonging. From that day on, the community kitchen grew. What started with a few families soon included dozens. Strangers became friends, neighbors became helpers, and slowly the town changed. People didn't just pass each other in silence anymore. They stopped, they greeted, they cared. The cashier still worked his shifts, still lived his simple life. But now, when he walked home, he noticed little things. Children laughing freely, old people smiling at strangers, neighbors offering to carry each other's loads. These small acts reminded him every day that his one refusal, the night he said keep them, had started something no wallet could measure. The mother, watching from her apartment window one evening, whispered to her daughter, "Look around, darling. Do you see? This is what kindness does. It doesn't stay with one person. It grows." The little girl nodded seriously as if she understood something far beyond her years. "It's like a story that never ends." The mother hugged her tightly, tears in her eyes. Yes, a story that never ends. And so the story of an empty wallet did not close with hunger or shame. It closed with lasting change. Change in a mother, in a daughter, in a cashier, and in a community. One quiet gesture had become a chain of humanity strong enough to lift many lives. In the end, the cashier's act was not remembered for the money he gave, but for the truth it carried. When one person refuses to let despair win, hope finds a way to live again.